First-person horror has existed as far back as games like The Note on the PlayStation 1. Even the original Resident Evil was firstly designed as a first-person horror game, until it was changed in development. The first-person perspective works in putting you directly in the front row seat to the horror. You not only control the main character, but you become them, seeing the world and events from their perspectives. Amnesia was one of the first examples of first-person horror to shoot into the mainstream, releasing at a time when online Let's Plays were their most popular and would go on to influence a craze of first-person horror afterwards, with Silent Hill and Resident Evil even following. In today's video, I'll take you through the Amnesia franchise, reviewing each installment whilst ranking them along the way. This is Amnesia. Enjoy. The first Amnesia game, subtitled The Dark Descent, released in 2010 for PC and was developed and published by Frictional Games. It wouldn't come to consoles until half a decade later, but that still wouldn't stop it from becoming one of the biggest horror games of the decade. And while a good portion of its success could be traced back to its YouTube fame, you've also got to give the game itself some credit for being one of the most atmospheric horror games ever made. Positioned for the whole game in the first-person perspective with no cutscenes taking you out of the pilot seat, The Dark Descent begins with you in control of a man named Daniel, who awakens in a horror classic, gothic European castle. The game takes place in Prussia in 1839, and Daniel awakes with amnesia, meaning we get to learn about the plot and lore of this game at the same time that Daniel does. All he's equipped with is a note reminding him that he must find the castle's baron, Alexander, and he must kill him. From here, you're on your descent into the darkness of Brennenburg Castle, uncovering the background of Daniel's amnesia and the events before the game through notes lying around the levels. Apparently, Daniel was once allies with Alexander Brennenburg, and the two would torture innocent people in order to harness a power source from them called Vitae, a bit like Monsters Inc. with the whole scare energy, but much more violent and inhumane. Daniel eventually found sense and was shook by what they were doing, and so drank an amnesia potion in order to forget. Throughout your journey, you're stalked by the game's rogues gallery of grotesque humanoid foes that you have no way of defending yourself against, a feature that Amnesia was famous for and what has inspired many future horror games. Amnesia forces you to run or hide. What you do have is a lamp that must be kept stocked up with oil and limited tinder boxes that are used to light up torches and candles within the castle. See, if you're in the dark for too long, your sanity will start to decline, fear will take over and you'll start to lose yourself. This will affect your vision, your controls, and trigger a little scratching noise in your head. You need to stay in the light or complete objectives to reclaim your sanity. I love this mechanic. It gave the game such a distinctive feature and it helped create some really nerve-wracking moments. The added environmental puzzles were also a great addition, giving it a slight Resident Evil mansion feel. Physics-based puzzles and using analog sticks to turn valves and open doors had you more involved in the gameplay. While The Dark Descent's graphics are fairly aged even for 2010, it does have really good use of lighting, and it displays perfectly that even a game on a tighter budget can still produce fantastic looking and atmospheric environments and some chilling sound design. The groans of the shadows, the moaning of the hallways, the creaks of the castle, all building this game's award-winning danger and terror factor. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is one of the most recognisable horror games in history for a good reason. It's full of intense and incredible environmental atmosphere, set in a richly detailed castle oozing with history and violence. It has gut-wrenching moments, terrific sound design, and a wild but enjoyable narrative. While its puzzle design is fairly simplistic and a lot of its weaker parts are scripted events, it's still a consistently incredible first-person horror experience. 1 year later, in 2011, Amnesia got an expansion called Justine, which is also available in the Amnesia collection. It features the same gameplay and environments, but you play as an unnamed woman who is put through tests in a string of puzzles throughout these dungeons. It features a permadeath system with no save spots, forcing you to play it all in one go. Thankfully, it doesn't last very long, but this does increase the scare factor of this expansion. I personally found some of the puzzle designs to be rather clunky, such as stacking boxes to reach a trapdoor you can barely see. It didn't quite feel as robust as the main game, and many times its physics puzzles and even more scripted events pulled me out of the experience. Still, as a 40-minute level, it's worth at least a try. It seems Amnesia was destined to be a one-hit wonder, as Frictional Games soon moved on from it to other projects. However, what was firstly a mod for Amnesia soon spun into a sequel. Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs first released in 2013 and was developed by the Chinese Room, known today for their walking sim-adventure games like Dear Esther and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. A Machine for Pigs was one of their earliest projects and is the third title available in the updated Amnesia collection. Following in its predecessor's footsteps, A Machine for Pigs once again tells a chilling tale of torture and inhumane horrors, and pits the player against this unspeakable evil without any defensive weapons. It's run, hide, or be slaughtered. A Machine for Pigs takes place on New Year's Eve of 1899, a whole 60 years after the Dark Descent. In this game we play as Oswald Manders, a rich industrialist and owner of his own meat production company. It's even implied in the game that he's the great-grandnephew of the first game's Daniel. Oswald awakes in his home suffering with amnesia. He's lost his two sons, Edwin and Enoch, and he must find them. A Machine for Pigs is set in Victorian London, and you'll work your way through Oswald's upper-class mansion and down into his disgusting, vile meat factories below the city, all to rescue his children from a mysterious voice over the phone that calls you periodically throughout the game. I don't really want to spoil any more than that, as A Machine for Pigs' narrative is certainly the game's strongest point. It's a detailed story, entangled with a deep descent into the sanity of our protagonist, and a description of the horrors of humanity's own creation. From a design standpoint, it's a welcome change from the first game's macabre castle setting to now a London mixed with decaying technological advancements, just with a few less shiny metal surfaces and much more pig guts. But what did surprise me was how A Machine for Pig drops the survival mechanics that made the Dark Descent so unique, for instead more of a walking simulator styled approach. Having no sanity meter anymore, your electric lamp no longer needs refueling, and you have no tinderboxes to light areas, as there's no need for them. The only gameplay that still exists as the still fairly cumbersome environmental puzzles, moving boxes, spinning levers, pulling switches. There's even very little enemy encounters, and when there is, it's highly scripted that you're never really in any danger. With no resource management, no sanity mechanic, and not all that many scares, damages A Machine for Pigs' fear factor massively. This is a much more scripted, linear and controlled story, set out to simply tell a narrative, and while it's a fun narrative with great writing, it's not enough to carry the entire game.
Don't go near it. You stupid, selfish little girl. We'll all die.
The future for Amnesia was pretty barren after A Machine for Pigs. Frictional Games wouldn't return to the series until 2020, with the latest installment in the once horror sensation being Amnesia Rebirth. Rebirth, much like A Machine for Pigs, makes references to the original game, and in Rebirth's case advances some of the lore of this universe, but all in all is still its own self-contained story. Rebirth takes place in Algeria in 1937, and as you're playing as a French archaeologist called Tassie Trianon. She, along with her fiancé and expedition, are flying over Africa when they suddenly crash into the desert. Tassie awakes with no recollection of the crash and no idea where the rest of her crew has vanished to. She does, however, now have a violent disease in which she uncontrollably bursts into fits of rage and anger if she lets it consume her, and staying in the darkness for too long will invite it to overwhelm her. So from the get-go, the mechanics from the original Amnesia are back, and it's a welcome return after playing A Machine for Pigs. Your oil lantern makes a return, shedding a bold spotlight throughout the darkness. Just like the original, you must keep it filled with canisters of oil found throughout the game. Replacing the first game's tinderboxes are now matches that Tassie can hold for a few seconds and use it to light any candles or torches around her for those precious few seconds until the match is all curled up and sizzled out. Matches I felt were perfectly distributed, enough to keep you going throughout the game whilst also feeling short of them as to make every one of them a precious loss. What Rebirth did bring to the table was Tassie is a pregnant woman. They even worked this into the gameplay by having you interact with the baby to keep it calm under stressful situations in the game, but it's mostly just trivial. Not really a standout point of the gameplay. Still, playing as this helpless pregnant woman is something I can say I've never experienced in a horror game before. Even though you forget many times with how much of a beating that Tassie takes in this game, yet her child is completely fine. Being set for the majority within the desert makes this game more about survival than ever before. Locations this time are war-torn villages and forts, and see the return of some physics-based environmental puzzles. Enemies in Amnesia Rebirth consist of the ghouls, these thin, vicious monsters that were once human but have fallen to this curse. Tassie herself is carrion. They don't feel all that different to the monsters in the original game, but once again hiding and fighting off the darkness whilst they're close by you is a welcome return after the more scripted and linear Machine for Pigs. Further into this game you'll enter what is called the Other World, a horrific dimension full of danger, darkness and alien technology. A new enemy introduced in this section is the Wraith. This floating humanoid creature felt very like the Dementors from Harry Potter. They basically stalk the level with this glowing stone that they use to try and find you. Without any feet, the Wraiths are difficult to notice where they are coming from, and looking at them for too long gives your location away to them. These were definitely the highlight of Rebirth for me, a brand new enemy type giving a more visceral and haunting experience, and the sci-fi otherworld sections are certainly where the puzzles and the danger were amplified. But the biggest problem I found with Rebirth is it just isn't as sharp as the Dark Descent in building that feel of paranoia. It's still quite a safe adventure. The sections are so distinctly separated that you'll know when you're safe, and you'll know when the running and hiding from a monster section is coming. It's not ever surprising or reinvents the wheel of first-person adventure horror. It plays it very safe. Overall, Amnesia Rebirth is another fun horror experience bringing yet a new angle to the series. No rusty factories, no gothic castles, but instead sand and sci-fi. While it introduces some new ideas such as playing as a helpless pregnant woman who must check on her baby whilst under stressful situations, it's just not quite enough to stop this game from falling into the void of other first-person horror games. If it wasn't called Amnesia, I don't think this game would have been as popular at all, because of how safe it plays everything. It is very familiar in this now bloated genre. I'd say this game is worth playing at least once for its story, much like Machine for Pigs, but that's not to say that you'll remember it long after. Now that we've looked at all three Amnesia games, let's rank them. At last place, I have Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs. For me, this was the lowest the series has gone, which is good because the game is rather a fun time. It's more of a ghost train experience. You're on this ride, you have very little interaction with the game world, and you get spooked every now and again. It's definitely the most linear and shortest out of the three, but its themes and story is well worth the playthrough. At second place, I have Amnesia Rebirth. I can't deny that this is the most polished game set in a beautiful African setting, following an entirely new plot while still having many references to the original. However, whilst it tries at some new ideas, I still couldn't hold back the feeling that Rebirth played it too safe, and in turn it doesn't feel all that apart from the many other horror games that imitated the original Amnesia. So, at first place goes Amnesia: The Dark Descent, a horror classic, pioneering the helpless, first-person horror which pits you on your own against an unkillable evil stalking the hallways of a familiar horror setting. You never feel safe in this game, you're always on the edge of your seat, your palms are constantly sweating, and the thrill is unlike any other games of the time. Amnesia had a really strong first entry, and I feel that over a decade later, it's a series that isn't quite as remembered as it really deserves. Probably thanks to the countless YouTube channels that milked the game dry by screaming in front of a camera. But personally, I feel that Amnesia needs another chance to get it right. Make a follow-up to Rebirth. You play as maybe a German soldier, trapped inside a dark World War II bunker, cut off from civilization. You've seen the horrors of war, and now he's being tormented by creatures from the other world for the things that he has done. It's just an idea on a new way we can possibly reinvent this series. Let me know what you think of the Amnesia series. Should it be laid to rest, or would you like to see more games set in this universe? Until next time, I'll catch you all in the next video, and have a great day. Thanks all for watching. Adios. Take care.